My daughter's voice still echoes in my kitchen when I think about that afternoon. Sharp, dismissive, cutting through me like a winter wind. "You're useless now, Mom. You can't even figure out how to use your own phone." She said it right there at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd taught her to read, where we'd celebrated every birthday, where I'd held her hand through her first heartbreak. Useless. That single word landed heavier than any physical blow ever could. I'm 68 years old. I worked as a registered nurse for 43 years before retiring. I raised 3 children mostly alone after my husband, Robert, died of a heart attack when he was only 47. I put all 3 kids through college on a nurse's salary and weekend shifts that left me so exhausted I'd fall asleep standing up in the shower. I bought this house with money I saved 1 paycheck at a time. I built a life. I built a family. And now my oldest daughter, Jennifer, stands in my kitchen calling me useless because I asked her to help me update my smartphone. The coffee in my favorite mug, the chipped blue one Jennifer made in pottery class when she was 12, had gone cold while I sat there processing what she'd just said. The morning light came through the lace curtains I'd hung 30 years ago. The same curtains I'd washed and rehung 100 times. Everything in this kitchen held a memory. The refrigerator covered in grandchildren's artwork. The cookie jar shaped like a rooster that Robert bought me on our anniversary. The wooden spoon rack I'd made in a craft class after he died, trying to fill empty evenings with something, anything, to keep my hands busy and my mind from breaking. But in that moment, all those memories felt contaminated by that one word, useless. It started small, like these things always do. Little comments here and there over the past year. Jennifer suggesting I should move into a retirement community because maintaining a house was too much for someone my age. My son David saying maybe I shouldn't drive at night anymore after I got slightly confused using a new GPS system. My youngest, Rachel, gently implying that I was becoming forgetful when I couldn't remember a conversation that, frankly, I'm not sure ever happened. Each comment alone seemed reasonable, even caring, but together, they created a narrative, a story about me that wasn't true, a story where I was declining, failing, becoming a burden, becoming useless. The smartphone incident was just the catalyst. I'd asked Jennifer to help me figure out how to video call my granddaughter, Emma, who just started college across the country. I couldn't get the app to work right. The buttons were small. The instructions online used terminology I didn't understand. So I called Jennifer, who lives just 15 minutes away, and asked if she could stop by and show me. She arrived irritated, rushed, checking her watch every 30 seconds like my need for help was an inconvenience she couldn't afford. She grabbed my phone with an exasperated sigh, tapped a few things, and shoved it back at me. "There. It's not complicated, Mom. Everyone knows how to do this." When I asked her to show me again slowly so I could learn the steps, she exploded. That's when the words came, the ones about me being useless, about how she didn't have time to teach me basic technology that even children understand, about how maybe it was time to think about moving somewhere with staff who could help me with these things since I clearly couldn't manage on my own. I sat there stunned, watching my daughter, the little girl I'd rocked through colic, walked to her first day of kindergarten, stayed up all night with during her teenage heartbreaks, look at me with something close to contempt. Then she left, just grabbed her purse and walked out, leaving me sitting at that kitchen table with my cold coffee and my confusion and that word hanging in the air like smoke, useless. I cried that afternoon. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I sat in my kitchen and cried like I hadn't cried since Robert's funeral. But somewhere between the tears and the anger and the hurt, something else started growing. A question. If I was so useless, why did my children suddenly care so much about my house, my savings, my estate planning? Jennifer had brought up my will 3 times in the past 6 months. David had asked pointed questions about my retirement accounts. Rachel had suggested I should start distributing assets early to avoid estate taxes, which I later learned wasn't even accurate advice for someone with my modest net worth. They thought I was useless, but they were very interested in what this useless old woman owned. That realization shifted something fundamental inside me. I'd spent the past year feeling guilty, feeling like maybe I was becoming a burden, feeling like maybe they were right to be frustrated with me. But if I was such a burden, such a useless drain on their time and patience, why all the interest in my finances? Why the pressure to sign updated beneficiary forms? Why did David volunteer to be the executor of my will when he'd never shown interest in family responsibility before? I spent that evening going through my financial documents. Everything I owned was modest but significant. This house worth about $350,000, paid off completely. Retirement savings of about $200,000, built slowly over decades of careful living and conservative investing. A small life insurance policy, some savings bonds, nothing extravagant. But together it represented a lifetime of work, sacrifice, and careful planning. And my 3 children were listed as equal beneficiaries on everything. They were waiting for me to die, or at least waiting for me to become incompetent enough that they could take control. The smartphone incident wasn't about concern for my well-being. It was about building a case, about establishing a pattern of incompetence that could later be used to justify taking over my finances, my decisions, my life. I was useless to them as a mother, as a person, but very useful, as an inheritance waiting to happen. The anger that came with that realization was different from any anger I'd felt before. It was cold, calculating, clear. I wasn't hurt anymore. I was done. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in the bed I'd shared with Robert for 19 years, the bed I'd slept in alone for 21 years since, and I stared at the ceiling thinking about everything I'd given my children. Not just money, though there'd been plenty of that. College tuition, down payments on their first cars, emergency loans that were never repaid, babysitting countless hours so they could work or have date nights, emotional support through divorces and job losses and every crisis life threw at them. I'd given them everything a mother could give, and somehow I'd become useless. But I wasn't useless. I was a retired nurse who'd managed complex medical cases and life-or-death decisions for 4 decades. I was a widow who'd raised 3 children alone while grieving and working full-time. I was a woman who'd built a comfortable retirement through discipline and planning. I was a lot of things. Useless wasn't one of them. By the time the sun came up Friday morning, I'd made a decision. If my children thought I was useless, if they were just marking time until they could inherit what I'd built, then I'd solve that problem for them. They wouldn't have to wait. They wouldn't have to pretend to care. They wouldn't have to manage the burden of a useless mother, because I was going to give it all away. Not to them, to people who actually needed it, to causes that mattered, to organizations that helped people, instead of dismissing them as useless when they asked for help. I was going to donate everything to charity. The idea felt radical and terrifying and absolutely right all at the same time. I'd spent my entire life putting my children first, sacrificing my wants for their needs, building security so they'd have something when I was gone. But why? So they could stand around my kitchen calling me useless. So they could count down the days until the burden of my existence was replaced by the windfall of my death? No. I was done with that story. I got up that Friday morning, made my coffee in that chipped blue mug, and started making phone calls, first to my financial advisor, Gerald, who I'd worked with for 15 years. He was shocked when I told him what I wanted to do. "Martha, are you sure? This is a big decision. Maybe you should discuss it with your children first." "Gerald, I'm 68 years old, and I've been making big decisions since before you were born. I don't need my children's permission to decide what to do with my own money. Can you help me? Or should I find someone who will?" There was a pause. Then he chuckled. "I can help you. What exactly are you thinking?" Over the next hour, I outlined my plan. I wanted to establish donations to several charities that mattered to me. The Children's Hospital, where I'd worked for 10 years. The hospice organization that had helped me care for Robert in his final weeks. A scholarship fund for nursing students from low-income families, an organization that provided technology training for seniors. Ironic, given why I was doing this, but important work nonetheless. I wanted the bulk of my liquid assets distributed to these organizations immediately. The house would be handled separately, but I wanted my financial accounts emptied except for what I needed to live comfortably for the rest of my days. Gerald walked me through the process, the tax implications, which would actually be favorable, the documentation needed, the timeline for transfers. He also suggested I consult with an attorney to update my will simultaneously, removing my children as beneficiaries, and establishing the house would be sold upon my death, with proceeds going to charity as well. He gave me a referral to an estate attorney named Patricia Morrison, who specialized in charitable giving. By noon, I had an appointment scheduled with Patricia for Monday morning. By that evening, I'd begun the paperwork to liquidate certain investments and prepare for the largest charitable donations I'd ever made in my life. By Sunday night, I'd drafted a letter to my children, explaining what I was doing and why. The letter was harder to write than I expected. How do you tell your children that their cruelty has consequences? How do you explain that being called useless by the people you raised and loved and sacrificed everything for feels like a kind of death? How do you make them understand that this isn't about revenge, it's about dignity? I wrote and rewrote that letter a dozen times. Each version felt too angry, or too sad, or too explanatory. Finally, I settled on something simple and direct. It read, "Dear Jennifer, David, and Rachel, you've made it clear recently that you consider me useless and burdensome. I've decided to relieve you of that burden. I'm donating my estate to charitable organizations that value contribution over convenience. This includes my liquid assets, investments, and ultimately this house after my passing. I'm keeping enough to live comfortably, but there will be no inheritance. You won't need to pretend to care anymore. You won't need to manage a useless mother. You're free. I hope you find that freeing. I know I do. Mom." Reading it back made my hands shake. This would devastate them, not because they loved me. Their recent actions had proven that love was conditional, at best, but because they'd been counting on that money, planning for it, maybe even spending it in their minds already. This would be a shock they weren't prepared for. Good. They'd shocked me too when they decided I was useless. Monday morning arrived cold and gray, the kind of November day that makes you want to stay in bed. But I got up, dressed carefully in the navy suit I'd worn to Robert's retirement party. He never got to actually retire, but we'd celebrated his upcoming retirement 3 weeks before the heart attack, and drove to Patricia Morrison's office downtown. The building was old but well-maintained, with the kind of solid brass fixtures and marble floors that spoke of permanence and seriousness. Patricia was younger than I expected, maybe 50, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. She listened carefully as I explained everything, the comments about my incompetence, the smartphone incident, Jennifer's words, my growing realization about their true motivations, and my decision to donate everything to charity. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and studied me for a long moment. "Mrs. Richardson, I need to ask you something directly. Are you doing this out of anger, or out of genuine desire to support these causes?" The question was fair. I thought about it carefully before answering. Both. I won't lie and say I'm not angry. I'm furious, but I'm also genuinely passionate about these organizations. I've thought for years about leaving them something substantial in my will. My children's behavior just made me realize, why wait? Why give everything to people who don't value me when I can give it to organizations doing important work? Why let them inherit what they clearly believe they're entitled to without earning? Patricia nodded slowly. "Then let's talk about how to structure this properly. I want to make sure your wishes are legally airtight, so your children can't challenge them after you're gone. And I want to make sure you're truly keeping enough for your own security and comfort. This isn't about impoverishing yourself to spite them." Over the next 2 hours, we mapped out a comprehensive plan. We'd establish several charitable trusts and make immediate significant donations. We'd update my will completely, removing my children as beneficiaries except for small personal items. Sentimental things like family photos and heirlooms, because I wasn't cruel enough to deny them their own family history. The house would be sold upon my death with proceeds split among my chosen charities. My retirement accounts would be retitled with the charities as beneficiaries. Everything would be documented, witnessed, and legally unassailable. Patricia also suggested something I hadn't considered. Given your children's comments about your competence, I recommend we have you evaluated by a geriatric psychiatrist. Not because I think there's anything wrong with you. You're clearly sharp and capable. But because if your children try to challenge this, they'll likely claim you weren't of sound mind. Having a recent professional evaluation stating your excellent mental capacity will shut that down immediately. Smart. Cold but smart. I agreed. By Wednesday of that week, I'd been evaluated by Dr. Samuel Chen, a geriatric psychiatrist Patricia recommended. He put me through 3 hours of cognitive testing, memory assessments, and psychological evaluation. At the end, he smiled and said, "Mrs. Richardson, your cognitive function is well above average for your age. Your memory, reasoning, and decision-making capacity are all excellent. If your family has concerns about your competence, those concerns are unfounded." I had him put that in writing. By Friday, exactly 1 week after Jennifer called me useless, I'd signed all the papers. $150,000 was being distributed to my chosen charities. The house deed was updated with a transfer on death designation to a charitable trust. My will was completely rewritten. My retirement accounts were retitled. Everything was done. Legal, final, irreversible. And I hadn't told my children yet. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with 3 envelopes. Each contained a copy of my letter plus a summary of what I'd done. Not for their approval, just for their information. I addressed them carefully in my best handwriting. Jennifer's envelope, David's envelope, Rachel's envelope. Then I drove to the post office and mailed them. I came home, made myself dinner. Just simple pasta with vegetables, nothing fancy, and ate it slowly at that same kitchen table. I kept waiting to feel guilty, to feel like I'd done something wrong, but all I felt was relief, and something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time: power, agency, control over my own life and what I'd built. The phone calls started Sunday morning. Jennifer first, her voice high and panicked. "Mom, what the hell is this letter? What have you done? You can't just give away our inheritance." Our inheritance. Not my money. Not my life's work. Our inheritance. Like it belonged to them. Like I was just a temporary custodian of wealth that was rightfully theirs. "I can, Jennifer." I did. It's done. This is insane. You're not thinking clearly. That smartphone thing upset you, and now you're making irrational decisions. We need to get you evaluated by a doctor. I smiled at that, even though she couldn't see me. Already done. Dr. Samuel Chen, geriatric psychiatrist. Full cognitive evaluation. He says I'm perfectly competent. The report is filed with my attorney. Try again. There was stunned silence. Then, "You can't do this to us. That money was supposed to help us. David has debt. Rachel's marriage is struggling. I was planning to use my part to help Emma with college. Then you should have treated me like I was worth more than my bank account. You called me useless, Jennifer. You stood in my kitchen and called me useless because I needed help with a phone. Did you think that wouldn't hurt? Did you think I wouldn't remember? Mom, I was having a bad day. I didn't mean..." "Yes, you did. You meant exactly what you said. And you know what? It clarified things for me. If I'm useless to you as a person, then I choose to be useful in other ways, to organizations that actually help people instead of dismissing them. This is because of one comment, one moment. You're throwing away our entire inheritance over one bad moment? No, Jennifer. This is because of a year of comments, a year of treating me like I'm incompetent, a year of managing me instead of respecting me, a year of being interested in my estate planning, but not in my life. You think I didn't notice? You think I'm too useless to see what was happening?" She started crying then, but they were angry tears, not sad ones. You're going to regret this. We'll fight it. We'll prove you weren't in your right mind. Good luck with that. My attorney is very thorough, but you're welcome to try. Just know that fighting it will cost you legal fees you apparently can't afford, and you'll lose. The evaluation is clear. The documentation is perfect. This is my money, and I did what I wanted with it. Legally, finally, completely. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline, from standing up for myself in a way I never had before. David called an hour later, trying a different approach. Reasonable, calm, the good son trying to talk sense into his confused mother. Mom, Jennifer told me about the letter. I think there's been a misunderstanding. We don't think you're useless. We're just worried about you. The comments about moving to a retirement community or not driving at night, those come from love. David, when did you last visit me without wanting something? Silence. When did you last call just to talk? When did you last show interest in my life rather than my finances? Be honest. More silence. That's what I thought. You can call it love if it makes you feel better. But it's not. It's management. You're managing the burden of an aging mother while waiting for the benefit of her death. I've removed the benefit. Now you can stop managing. Mom, that's not fair. We do care about you. Show me. Show me by caring about me when there's nothing to gain from it. Show me by valuing me as a person instead of an estate plan. Show me that I'm worth more to you than my bank account. How can we show you that now? You've already given everything away. Exactly, David. Now you'll have to care about me for me. If you actually do care, that shouldn't be a problem, should it? He didn't have an answer for that. Rachel called last, 2 hours later. She took a different approach entirely. Guilt. Mom, how could you do this to your grandchildren? Emma's college fund. The money I was going to use to stabilize my marriage so my kids don't go through a divorce. You're hurting them to punish us. That one stung, I'll admit. But I'd thought it through. Rachel, I've already helped with Emma's college. I gave Jennifer $15,000 for Emma's freshman year, remember? Money that was never repaid and never acknowledged after the initial thank you. As for your marriage, money doesn't fix relationships. If your marriage is struggling, that's between you and your husband. My bank account isn't the solution to your problems. And if you'd actually spent time with me instead of just asking about my estate plans, you'd know I've been volunteering at a literacy program, teaching adults to read. You'd know I've been taking watercolor classes. You'd know I have a full life that doesn't revolve around being your future inheritance. But Mom, I'm not finished. You want to talk about grandchildren? The children's hospital I donated to helps hundreds of children. The hospice organization comforts families in their worst moments. The scholarship fund will put dozens of nursing students through school who otherwise couldn't afford it. I'm helping many grandchildren, Rachel. Just not only my own. She was quiet for a moment. Then, quietly, did you ever actually love us? Or were we just obligations to you? That question hurt more than anything Jennifer had said. I loved you enough to raise you alone after your father died. I loved you enough to work double shifts so you could have what you needed. I loved you enough to sacrifice my wants for your needs for decades. But love isn't ownership, Rachel. I loved you. I did my job as a mother. And now I'm choosing how to spend the resources I built. That's not lack of love. That's me finally loving myself enough to have boundaries. After I hung up with Rachel, I turned my phone off. I didn't want to hear anymore. I didn't want to be convinced or guilted or manipulated. I'd made my decision, and I was at peace with it. But little did I know, they weren't done trying. The next week was quiet. Too quiet. My children weren't calling, weren't texting, weren't showing up. Part of me wondered if that was it, if they'd accepted the situation and moved on. But part of me knew better. They were planning something, strategizing, maybe consulting lawyers of their own to see if there was any way to reverse what I'd done. I spent that week settling into my new reality. The money was gone from my accounts, transferred to the charities. The paperwork was filed. My will was updated and properly witnessed. Patricia assured me everything was legally sound. Doctor Chen's evaluation was part of my permanent medical record. There was nothing to undo, nothing to challenge, successfully. I was protected by every legal safeguard that existed. I also spent time with the charities themselves. I visited the Children's Hospital and toured the cancer ward, where my donation would fund a new playroom. I met with the hospice organization and learned about their music therapy program. My money would expand. I attended a scholarship award ceremony where 3 nursing students received funding I'd established. It felt good, really good. Better than sitting at home waiting to die so my children could inherit. Then Thursday afternoon, 11 days after I'd mailed the letters, Jennifer showed up at my door with David and Rachel. All 3 of them, united front. This should have been my first warning that something was wrong, because my children were never united about anything. Jennifer and Rachel had barely spoken for 2 years after a fight about Rachel's wedding. David lived 3 hours away and visited maybe twice a year. But here they were, together, looking serious and determined. "Mom, we need to talk," Jennifer said. I let them in, mostly because I was curious about what approach they'd take now. We sat in my living room, them on the couch, me in Robert's old recliner. The afternoon light came through the windows, highlighting the dust motes floating in the air, peaceful and ordinary, the calm before the storm. "Mom," Jennifer began, and her tone was different now, softer, more controlled, like she'd practiced this. "We've been talking, all 3 of us, and we realize we haven't been fair to you. We haven't been attentive. We've been caught up in our own lives, and we've taken you for granted. We see that now. We're sorry. I waited. There was more coming." David took over. "We understand why you were hurt. The things we said, the way we treated you. That wasn't okay. You raised us better than that. You deserved better than that. And we want to make it right." Still, I waited. Rachel finished the rehearsed speech. "We want to start over. We want to be involved in your life for real, not just when we need something. We want to have Sunday dinners together like we used to, when Dad was alive. We want to know about your watercolor classes and your volunteering. We want to be a real family again." It was a good speech, well coordinated, sincere sounding, and absolutely full of shit. "Let me guess," I said quietly. "You've talked to lawyers and they've told you there's no way to challenge the donations or the will changes, so now you're trying a different approach, reconciliation. If you can prove you're devoted children, maybe I'll change my mind and rewrite everything back to benefit you." The looks on their faces told me I was right. "Mom, that's not—" Jennifer started, but I held up my hand. Don't lie to me anymore. I've been lied to enough. You're not here because you suddenly realized you love me. You're here because you've realized the money is actually gone, and this is your last play to get it back." "That's not fair," David said, his voice rising. "Maybe we did talk to lawyers. Maybe we did realize there's no legal way to fix this. But that doesn't mean we don't genuinely want to repair our relationship with you." "Repair it with what goal, David? Be honest. If I had no money, if this house was worthless, if there was nothing to inherit, would you be here right now? Would you 3 have gotten together and coordinated this intervention? Or would you have just written off your difficult mother and moved on with your lives?" The silence was answer enough. Rachel's eyes filled with tears, but I'd learned to recognize which tears were real and which were performance. These were performance. "Mom, you're our mother. Of course we'd want a relationship with you regardless of money. Then prove it. Live the next 5 years showing me that. Visit me when you don't want anything. Call me when you're not asking for something. Be interested in my life without an ulterior motive. And maybe, I'll consider adding you back to my will. But right now, today, in this moment, you're not getting what you came for." Jennifer's mask slipped. The soft, apologetic daughter vanished, and the angry, entitled one returned. "So that's it. You're just going to let strangers benefit from everything Dad worked for? Everything you both built together? You're going to let it go to people who never knew you instead of your own children? Your father worked hard so we could provide for you. While you were growing up, we did that. We fed you, housed you, educated you. We fulfilled our obligation as parents. He never said his life's work was to make you rich. He said it was to raise good humans. I'm starting to think we failed at that. That landed hard. Rachel actually flinched. David's jaw clenched. Jennifer's face went red. I want you to leave now, I said, standing up. And I want you to understand something very clearly. The money is gone. The will is changed. No amount of manipulation or fake reconciliation is going to change that. If you want a relationship with me going forward, it will be on my terms. You'll treat me with respect. You'll value me as a person. You'll stop managing me and start seeing me. And it won't come with an inheritance at the end. If you can't do that, then this is goodbye. They didn't move at first, all three staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Then slowly, they stood. Jennifer grabbed her purse with jerky, angry movements. David's face was stiff and closed off. Rachel was crying for real now, but I didn't know if it was grief over losing the money or over losing me. Maybe she didn't know either. They left without another word. I closed the door behind them and stood in the quiet of my living room, listening to their cars start and drive away. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking, but I didn't feel bad. I felt powerful, strong. Like maybe for the first time in my adult life I'd put myself first. The next few weeks were strange. No calls, no texts, no contact at all from any of my children. It should have hurt, but mostly it felt peaceful. I went about my life, my watercolor classes on Tuesdays, volunteering at the literacy center on Thursdays, coffee with my friend Margaret every Saturday morning. I lived, just lived, without the weight of managing my children's expectations or emotions. Then about a month after the confrontation, I got a call from an unexpected source, my granddaughter Emma. She was home from college for Thanksgiving break and wanted to see me. I was surprised. I figured Jennifer would have poisoned Emma against me, but I agreed to meet her for lunch. Emma showed up at the cafe, looking so much like Jennifer at that age. It was startling. Same dark hair, same serious eyes, same determined set to her jaw. We ordered, made small talk about college, and then Emma got to the point. Grandma, Mom told me what happened, about the money and the donations and everything. Here it comes, I thought, the guilt trip delivered via grandchild. But Emma surprised me. I think what you did was brave. I blinked, not sure I'd heard right. Brave? She nodded, stirring her coffee. Mom's been going on and on about how you're being irrational and vindictive, but from what I understand, you donated your own money to causes you care about. That's not irrational. That's your right. And honestly, some of the things Mom said about you over the past year have bothered me. The way she talks about you like you're incompetent or a burden, it's not okay. I felt tears prick my eyes. Hearing this from Emma, this validation from a grandchild I'd assumed would side with her mother, was unexpected and deeply moving. Thank you, sweetie. That means a lot. I'm not saying it because I'm expecting you to change your mind or anything, Emma added quickly. I have scholarships and loans for school. I'm fine. I'm saying it because it's true. You spent your whole life taking care of everyone else. You deserve to make decisions about your own life and your own money. We talked for 2 hours. Emma told me about college, about her classes in environmental science, about her dreams of working in conservation. She asked about my watercolor classes and my volunteering. She showed genuine interest in my life as it existed now, not as a connection to potential inheritance. It reminded me what family was supposed to feel like. As we were leaving, Emma hugged me tight. Grandma, I love you, not because of what you can give me, just because you're you. I hope you know that. I held her close, breathing in her familiar scent. She still used the same strawberry-ish shampoo she'd loved since she was 10. I love you too, Emma. So much. That lunch with Emma shifted something in me. It reminded me that not all family relationships were transactional, that genuine love did exist, that I'd done something right in raising my children, even if they'd lost their way, because somehow they'd raised Emma to be a better person than they'd become. Thanksgiving came and went. I spent it with Margaret and her family, which was lovely and warm and not at all awkward. Christmas approached and I prepared myself for a holiday alone, which didn't feel as sad as it might have. I was learning that being alone and being lonely were different things. Then 2 days before Christmas, I got an unexpected knock on my door. It was David. Just David. Not his siblings. He looked tired, older somehow than when I'd seen him a month earlier. "Mom, can I come in? I'm not here to fight or convince you of anything. I just want to talk." I let him in, cautious but curious. We sat in the kitchen. I made tea, the ritualistic hospitality ingrained in me after decades of motherhood. David wrapped his hands around the warm mug and stared into it for a long moment before speaking. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said finally, "about what you said, about when I last visited without wanting something, about whether I'd be here if you had nothing to give me. And I didn't like the answers I came up with." He looked up at me, and I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. Genuine emotion, real remorse. "You were right, Mom, about all of it. I've been treating you like an obligation, like something to manage until the inevitable. And that's horrible. You raised me better than that. Dad would be ashamed of me." The mention of Robert hit me hard. David had been 13 when Robert died, old enough to remember his father clearly. Robert had been strict, but loving, with high expectations about character and integrity. He would indeed be ashamed of how his children had treated me. "I can't speak for Jennifer or Rachel," David continued, "but I want to apologize, really apologize, not as a strategy to get you to change your mind about the will, but because I owe you that. You deserved better than how I treated you, how we all treated you. I'm sorry." I searched his face, looking for the manipulation, the angle, the ulterior motive, but I couldn't find it. He just looked sad and sincere and genuinely regretful. "What changed?" I asked. "Why now?" He smiled sadly. "My daughter Hannah. She's 15 now, getting ready to think about colleges. Last week she asked me about my mom, about you, what you were like, if you'd help her with college like you helped with Emma. And I had to explain what happened. Not the version where you're irrational, the real version, where we treated you badly and you decided you deserved better." He took a shaky breath, and Hannah looked at me with such disappointment. She said, "Dad, Grandma worked as a nurse her whole life to help people, and you treated her like her only value was money she'd give you someday? That's really sad." And she was right. It is really sad. I'm sad that I did that to you. I felt my own eyes filling with tears. "Thank you for telling me that, David, for being honest. I'm not asking you to change the will back," he said firmly. "That's your decision, and I respect it. What you do with your money is entirely up to you. But I'm asking if maybe we could start over. If I could visit sometimes just to visit, call sometimes just to talk, be your son, without any agenda except actually being your son." I thought about it carefully, about whether I could trust this, about whether it was real or just a more sophisticated manipulation. But I thought about Emma's lunch, about her genuine affection with no strings attached, about how people could change if they actually wanted to, about how forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, but it might mean allowing space for something different. "We can try," I said carefully. "But David, I need you to understand. If this is just another angle, if I find out you're still just managing me or waiting for me to change my mind about the will, I'll cut contact completely. I won't give you another chance. I'm too old to waste time on relationships that aren't real." He nodded. "I understand. And I mean it, Mom. No agenda. Just, I miss my mother. I miss having someone to call when something good happens or when I need advice. I miss the mom who used to listen to me talk for hours about nothing. I want that back, if you're willing to let me try." We talked for 2 more hours about his work, his marriage, Hannah's college plans, about my watercolor classes and volunteering, about memories of Robert, about Christmas when David was young, about life before everything got complicated. It felt tentative and fragile, but also genuine, in a way our interactions hadn't been in years. When he left, he hugged me at the door. "Merry Christmas, Mom. I love you. Just in case I haven't said that enough. I love you too, David. Merry Christmas." I closed the door and leaned against it, overwhelmed by the emotional whiplash of the past 2 months. From being called useless, to giving away a fortune to family confrontations, to unexpected reconciliations with Emma. And now, David. It was exhausting, but it was also real, raw and painful and honest and real. The next few months were a process of rebuilding, slowly and carefully. David called every Sunday just to talk. He visited once a month, bringing Hannah, who was delightful and curious, and wanted to learn about nursing and hear stories about her grandfather. Emma came home for spring break and spent 2 full days with me, helping me organize old photo albums and asking questions about family history. Those relationships felt authentic in a way they hadn't before. Jennifer and Rachel, however, remained absent. I heard through David that Jennifer was still angry, still convinced I'd been irrational and unfair. Rachel had apparently moved across the country and was barely in touch with any of the family. The division hurt, but I also recognized it as their choice. I'd extended the possibility of relationship without conditions. They'd chosen not to take it. 6 months after I'd made the donations, I got a call from Patricia Morrison, my attorney. "Martha, I have some news you might find interesting. Remember that evaluation Dr. Chen did establishing your competence? Of course, Jennifer tried to have it overturned. She hired her own psychiatrist to evaluate you and declare you incompetent so she could challenge the will and donations. The doctor refused to do it. He said after reviewing Dr. Chen's assessment and speaking with you briefly, he found no evidence of diminished capacity. He refused to falsify a report. I sat down heavily, shocked that Jennifer had gone that far. Tried to have me declared incompetent. Tried to take control of my life and decisions. What happens now? Nothing. Her attempt failed. The original evaluation stands. Your will and donations are secure. But I thought you should know the lengths she was willing to go to. After I hung up, I felt a strange mix of sadness and vindication. Sadness that my daughter cared so little about me, that she'd try to have me declared mentally unfit, just to get money. Vindication that I'd been absolutely right about her motivations, and my decision to protect myself legally. That evening I called David and told him what Patricia had told me. There was a long silence on the phone. Then, "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry that's who Jennifer has become. You deserve better than that." "Yes," I said simply. "I do. And I've decided I'm going to stop apologizing for knowing my worth and protecting myself." As I approached my first anniversary of making the donations, I reflected on everything that had changed. I'd given away most of my liquid wealth, secured my home to benefit charity after my death, and created an irreversible plan that meant my children would inherit almost nothing. From the outside, it might look spiteful or rash, but from the inside, it felt like the first fully authentic decision I'd made in years. The charities sent updates on how my donations were being used. The Children's Hospital sent pictures of kids playing in the new playroom, bright and cheerful and full of hope despite their illnesses. The hospice organization sent a letter from a family whose mother had received music therapy in her final weeks, describing how much comfort it had brought. The scholarship fund sent me a graduation announcement from one of the nursing students I'd helped fund, along with a handwritten note thanking me for making her career possible. These weren't my children, but in a way they were my legacy. Real impact on real lives. People who benefited from my life's work not because they happened to be born to me, but because they genuinely needed help. It felt right in a way that leaving everything to Jennifer, David, and Rachel never had. I also noticed changes in myself. I stood straighter. I spoke more directly. I stopped apologizing for taking up space or having needs or asking for help. When I needed assistance with technology, I asked the young woman at the library to show me patiently, and I didn't feel stupid or useless learning. I was just learning, like humans do throughout their entire lives. I joined a book club at Margaret's suggestion and discovered I loved discussing literature with people who valued my opinions. I took a solo trip to the coast, something I'd never done, and spent 3 days painting watercolors of the ocean and eating good food and existing entirely for myself. I volunteered more hours at the literacy center and found deep satisfaction in watching adults learn to read, their faces lighting up with the same joy I'd seen in my children's faces when they were young and I'd taught them their letters. I was building a life that had nothing to do with being a mother or a grandmother or a widow. I was just Martha. Martha who liked watercolors and books and helping people and eating chocolate ice cream for breakfast, sometimes because who was going to stop me? Martha who had value that had nothing to do with what she could provide for others. Martha who was decidedly not useless. About 18 months after the initial conflict, I got another unexpected visitor. Rachel. She showed up on a Saturday morning without calling first, looking nervous and thin and older than her 40 years. I almost didn't let her in, given everything that had happened. But something in her face, a kind of broken humility, made me open the door wider. We sat in the living room, the same place where she and her siblings had staged their intervention. But this was different. Rachel didn't have her armor on. She looked exposed and frightened and deeply sad. "Mom, I need to tell you something. And I'm not here to ask for anything. I just need you to know." I waited, my heart beating faster. "My marriage ended 6 months ago. You were right that money wouldn't fix it. I thought if I just had enough money, if I could just make things comfortable enough, Tom would stop being angry all the time. But the money wasn't the problem. He was the problem. He was abusive, Mom. Not physically, but emotionally. And I'd been using the idea of your inheritance like a lifeline, like someday I'd have enough money to leave safely. When that disappeared, when I realized I couldn't count on that safety net, I had to face that I needed to leave anyway, even without money." Tears were streaming down her face now. "And I did. I left him. I'm living in a tiny apartment across the country with my kids, working 2 jobs to make ends meet. It's hard. It's so hard. But it's better than staying in a toxic marriage waiting for my mother to die so I could afford to leave." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Rachel had been in an abusive marriage and I hadn't known. I hadn't been close enough to know. "Rachel, honey, why didn't you tell me? I would have helped you leave. You didn't need to wait for an inheritance." She shook her head. "I couldn't tell you. I was ashamed. And honestly, the way we were all treating you, I didn't feel like I could come to you for help. We'd made it clear you were just a resource to us, not a person, not someone we'd turn to for emotional support. And that was our fault, not yours." She took a shaky breath. "I'm here because I need to apologize. Really apologize. What we did to you was wrong. What I said about you hurting your grandchildren by donating to charity, that was manipulation. And it was cruel. You were right to protect yourself. You were right about all of it. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I moved to sit next to her on the couch, putting my arm around her shoulders. She collapsed against me, sobbing in a way that felt like years of held-back grief. I held her like I'd held her when she was small and had nightmares, rocking slightly, murmuring comfort. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now. You got out. That took courage." We talked for hours. Rachel told me about the marriage, about the slow erosion of her self-worth, about how she'd convinced herself she was the problem. She told me about finally leaving, about the fear and relief and freedom. She told me about her kids, about how they were adjusting to the divorce and the move. She told me about her jobs, about night shifts at a call center and weekend shifts at a retail store, about being exhausted but finally feeling like herself again. "I'm not asking you to change your will back," she said at one point. "I don't deserve that and I don't expect it. But I'm asking if maybe we could talk sometimes. If I could call you not for money advice, but for life advice. If you'd be willing to be my mom again, even though I don't deserve it." I looked at my youngest daughter, at the broken open honesty in her face, at the real change I could see in her eyes. "We can start over, Rachel, slowly, carefully. But yes, you can call me. You can be my daughter again. That never actually stopped, even when things were bad. You've always been my daughter. I just needed you to see me as a full person, too." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I see you now, Mom. I see how strong you are, how brave, what you did, giving away that money, standing up to us. That wasn't vindictive. That was self-preservation. That was survival. And I respect the hell out of it." Rachel stayed for dinner that night. We made spaghetti together. working side by side in the kitchen where I'd cooked thousands of meals over the years. We talked about easy things, recipes, her kids' school activities, my watercolor class. We rebuilt something fragile and tentative but real, when